We're still missing a few folks. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Great. Thanks. I think we're missing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Elaine, was Nick going to join us on this? I can't remember.
No.
Okay. I didn't think so.
Is Julia with us?
I don't see Julia yet. Let me just make sure.
We just finished up another meeting, so she may be just joining us.
Oh, okay.
Chris, do you know if John Southgate's coming or has he transitioned?
You know, I haven't seen him. I do not know.
He said yes. He told me yes.
Okay.
So. I just sent a text to Julia, but I think we're still missing a few people. Let's see. 2, 3, 5, 6.
Hello.
Hello, Julia.
Were you guys waiting for me? I hope not.
No, I think I can't tell, but I think we're still missing a few people. We have Phil, Sandra, Chris,
I'll text John, see
Lori,
what he's up to.
Kim Rosner, Justin. I know we're waiting for John because he said he was going to come, and we know Rebecca can't come. She just wrote us.
And we have Corey. Is he here?
Corey is here. We've got Justin, Kim Rosner, Corey, Chris, Cassandra, Phil. And I expect John Southgate is going to join us. We can wait a few more minutes, perhaps.
Why don't you start without him? He'll probably join us.
So I think I'm supposed to call the meeting to order. So I am calling the meeting to order. And then I'm actually going to turn it over to Elaine. Well, I guess the meeting notes, I believe, are in your packet. Those were prepared. They're not formally minutes that have to be adopted, but if anybody had any comments or questions about the notes, we'd like to hear those.
They look fine to me.
Okay, not hearing any other comments or questions. Thanks, Chris, for your comment and validation that they were fine. So then I will turn it over to Elaine to begin sharing the finance plan. And Elaine, you are muted. I don't know if you know that. Elaine, we're still not hearing you. So
yes,
sure.
for some reason, Does somebody have, this worked when I did it with Bruce before, but it says now that somebody has to give me control.
Oh, how do we do that? Oh, crap.
Who set up the meeting?
I set up the meeting, and I don't see anything that says I can just give control. Hide. Oh, crap.
Where are you?
I'm in the conference room.
So Bruce and I got on early just to make sure this would work.
Yeah, it worked perfectly earlier.
Worked then.
A quarter after. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Does everybody see this now?
Oh, she got it working?
Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank So what happens to me when I put this screen up is I cannot see any of you anymore. So I've asked Bruce and Julia too, if you guys could just check for folks if you see questions or people who want to make comments, make sure and let me know, because I can't see anybody when I start doing this on my screen under this platform. So thank you all for joining us for our third meeting, which is mostly to go over the financial projections on the area. And this is our roadmap, which goes along with the agenda that you got. So we're under the finance plan now. We'll give you an update on the maximum indebtedness and projects. We'll go through the finance packet, and then we'll talk about the process for concurrence for public buildings, the process for county approval for unincorporated properties, the next steps, and then adjourn. So under maximum indebtedness, we had a meeting with you for last month, and we moved that out because we briefed the city council on where we were to date and the different projects, and got their input on the priority of the projects. And as a result of that meeting, we were asked to recalculate our financial projections using a 7% growth, assessed value growth scenario. We did that and shared that information with the city. And as we did that, we went back and checked the maximum indebtedness limitations that are stated in the statute ORS 457. And those limitations are actually tied to when you get an assessed value as high as is in this area, they're tied to certain formulaic limitations. The present numbers using that 7% growth rate exceed those statutory limitations. And we prepared all of the information for the draft plan and report and for this meeting based on that 7% scenario that exceeds the limitations. And that is what we're presenting today. And we felt comfortable, Nick Papanek, who does all the financial data, and I felt comfortable presenting that to you today because what we know is the maximum indebtedness that we finally land on will not exceed the figure that we're reviewing today. And I think that is the figure that is most important to, especially the other taxing districts, is to know a not to exceed number. We have presented the city with a couple of options for trying to figure out that exact maximum indebtedness limitation. And we are working through those options right now just to make sure that our final plan and report comply with ORS 457. But for this presentation, we're presenting you information based on that increased number of $166,600,000. How that compares to what we looked at our last meeting, which those were the feasibility projections. Those projections were based on a 6% AV growth. So at that point, we thought that the maximum indebtedness would be $131,500,000. That gave the capacity for projects of $73,800,000. With a 7% AV growth, the maximum indebtedness increases to that 166,600,000 figure, with a capacity for projects of 88,900,000. One of the reasons why the city is interested in this second scenario is that it provides more capacity in the early years, and there are a number of projects that the city would like to move forward on very quickly. So I'm going to stop at this point just to see if there are questions from people on what this change is and what it means.
And I'm not currently seeing any hands raised.
Okay. So in terms of the projects have not changed in terms of the projects to be put into the plan, except for one category, and that's developer incentives. As we were preparing the actual plan and report, when we looked at both the development of the present public works facility and the tannery site, both of those actually fit under a general category of developer incentives. And as we talked with the staff, we recognized that there may be interest in being able to provide incentives for future development on other sites within the urban renewal area that we don't presently know. So as a result of those conversations, we added a category, developer incentives, to both cover if that public works facility moves and you can redevelop the site that's more in your central business district, and the tannery site cleanup. So other than that, those projects remain the same. Any questions on projects?
Elaine, this is Cassandra.
Yes.
I know we're going to be having additional discussion about the public works facility, but that's still probably going to, our board would likely express a lot of curiosity and concern and potentially not approve the concurrency needed for that facility, just based on, whether or not that proves to invite private investment, versus is it something that should be bonded for by vote of the people. So that project, including the pedestrian bridge, which we talked about last time, will likely both remain concerning for our board.
Okay. Thank you for that input. That's important for us to know, because we will formally be having to go to your board for the public works facility. The pedestrian bridge, obviously you can give input on any of the projects, but we don't have to have formal approval on that project.
I think
Any
Tim
other?
may have his hand up.
Yeah, thanks for that input, Cassandra. This is Tim. I just want to make sure that, too, as we have those conversations, I did have a brief conversation with your chief about it, just full disclosure. We want to make sure that when we talk about that folks understand that what we're really talking about doing is moving the public works facility to a location that currently is not developable and freeing up the current location for development. So there is upside in terms of property tax revenue, and I think that's going to be important as we present that to your board, that they understand that.
Definitely, because our base is frozen for 30 years, and that's represents, our foregone revenue represents more than a decade of operating a fire station, then,
Yeah.
the whole opportunity cost of it remains fairly high.
Cassandra, are there things that that you are aware of that we could potentially do to alleviate those concerns, short of removing it entirely?
I'll certainly talk it over with our fire chief and can vet that, with our board prior to having the official conversation. matching or a certain amount of commitment from non-TIF monies is one potential thing that would be probably useful for them to know that there's a plan, maybe even partially bonding for it. So it's not all, you know, at a price tag of $27 million, it's pretty high.
And Julia, was this project fully funded by Urban Renewal or just a portion? I can't remember the break.
I believe it's half, and with the assumption that rates would pay for the other half.
Okay.
That's helpful info. Thank you.
And as for all of the taxing districts from whom we would need concurrence, we will be preparing a formal letter that both transmits the plan and report, but also explains the particular project, what it is, what's expected to happen, what the funding ratio is expected to be. So that will be contained in the body of the letter that asks for concurrence to assist you in presenting that to your boards.
Excellent. And it might be useful too to have a representative from the city to present that, just to be able to describe the scope and expectations for their insight. That way I'm not parroting, yeah, or, you know, it gives you the opportunity to sell it.
Yes, what we're hoping for is for all of the taxing Washington County, PBFNR, the school district, and of course the city would also be asked for concurrence, is to have a presentation where city representatives, city electeds, and I would present the information.
Excellent.
And I would be curious to hear from the school district and the county if they have any immediate concerns with the concurrence.
This is Phil. As I mentioned at the last meeting, I think it just it does feel like it's more of a geo bond project. I don't remember the discussion regarding that the intent was to move the existing site to a non-developable site, freeing up that one. So if that was mentioned before it went past me, but that might make it a little more, kind of change the thinking a little bit on that, I guess.
And Julie, we're planning to cover that when you guys come on March 16th.
Okay.
So we'll share that information. And my question though, I had before that was, when do you think you'll be submitting the letter?
March 4th, I believe.
Okay, I'll just want to make sure that we have a heads up so that they'll know what it is when they get it. Thanks.
And it'll come through you.
Oh, okay.
So you'll get copied.
Okay.
So
okay, great, perfect, thanks.
3 of you who represent here will be copied to the formal letters.
Okay, thanks.
So the financial packet was sent out to you. Earlier, I tried sharing that on this screen, and I'm going to try it again.
Elaine,
Yes?
just a second. Sorry, Tim, you have your hand risen. Do you have another question, or have you not lowered your hand?
Well, I have to take it down, but since you called on me, I will just do a brief comment. And maybe this is for Joe. Joe, I think it's really important that we put together a really good factual narrative of what we're talking about in relocating the Public Works building, because that, on the surface, I completely understand the concern because it's not generating additional property tax. It's not an incentive. So I think we really need to explain that, because it does free up quite a bit of prime developable land downtown. So we need to quantify that for the different agencies so they understand it.
Yep, totally agree. I mean, you know, the the simple way of looking at this, the site that we're targeting right now is a brownfield. It's owned by the county. It's not generating any property taxes at all. The current Public Works building is owned by the city, generating no property taxes at all. We will build a new Public Works building on a piece of land that is publicly owned. That won't generate any property taxes, but the current site, which is adjacent to Old Town, can be redeveloped, and that will start to generate property taxes. So I think ultimately you're going to see an increase in property taxes, and it doesn't sound like that. It's a little bit complicated, and we need to do our part to explain that thoroughly. We think there's a benefit to the other taxing districts by doing this, besides the fact that we need a new Public Works building that will stand up in an earthquake, for example. But that's why we need to do this partially. So we can talk more, but just a little bit more background. And Councilor Rosner, you're right. We need to really put that in writing so it makes sense to everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share the screen for where to go. Sorry, I'm going to have to pull it up. It looks like it.
While she's doing that, Tim, your hand is still raised. I can't call on you if I just think your hand is up all the time.
It's down now.
Good. Elaine,
I'm
we saw
almost
it.
I'm almost there. I'm sorry. It didn't like it because it was on the wrong screen. So I know these numbers are small, and Bruce and I tried to figure out how to make them bigger so that we could show them on a screen, but they're not easy to get bigger. I know you had the packet sent to you, and I don't know if you've printed it out or not. But what I will do is walk you through this, and I think on this particular table, it's not really that important that you see every number, but it's important for you to understand how we get to the numbers. So let me walk through these tables. At the end of each table, I'll give you a chance to ask any questions about the table, and then we can go back and answer anything specific if we need to. So when we start with the financial analysis, I always work with Nick Papanuck of Tiberius Solutions, and we've worked together for nearly 15 years. So we know our process very well, and he has a very complicated spreadsheet that he puts together for these projections. He starts first with trying to establish what the frozen base is. So on this table, it shows what we project the frozen base. So that's the assessed value of the area at the time it would be established of $194,753,980. The first year of tax increment would be projected for fiscal year end 2023. And at that time, with a 3%, well, actually, this is with a 7% growth scenario, the total TIF, the total assessed value in that area would be 236 million plus. So then you have your frozen base of 194 plus million, which gives you an increment. So that's the amount, the difference between the total assessed value and the frozen base of nearly $42 million. You multiply that times the tax rate, and you get a gross amount of tax increment proceeds that's adjusted for underpayments and delinquencies. So then you get a net amount of projected tax increment revenues. And in that first year, fiscal year in 2023, there's no prior year taxes that come in. So then the final column is what the net tax increment revenues to the Urban Renewal Agency are projected to be. So this is always the very first table in our analysis. And this particular page goes to fiscal year end 2040, and then the next page goes to fiscal year end 2052, which is the projected termination of the area, which shows that the net amount of tax increment revenue is that very final row and column on this page, which is a little over $184 million. So that's higher than the maximum indebtedness because that includes interest paid on debt. And by statutory definition, interest paid on debt is not included in a maximum indebtedness calculation. So are there any questions on what this table 1 represents or how we get to the numbers?
I have one little question. Column 1, is that the total for the city? And the frozen base is the portion within the urban renewal area?
No, the column 1 is just the total for the urban renewal area, not the city.
I wish it
Okay.
was for the city.
Yeah.
The total, okay. And then why is the frozen base not the same as the total then?
The frozen base is the amount at the time it's established. So if this gets established this year, we would anticipate that the assessed value at that time is 194 plus million. So the first column is that frozen base plus any growth in the area from the time the frozen base is established.
Oh, for the next year
Yes.
or 2 years?
So
Yeah.
Okay.
Chris, if you add the frozen
got it.
base column and the increment column,
All
that
right.
totals the total column.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. Thanks.
No problem. These are very complicated tables, so any questions are
It's
Definitely.
like now or never. If I don't understand it now.
So any other questions on table 1? So table 2 just shows, given that increased growth rate, the total net, and these are in rounded dollars, the total net tax increment revenue would be a little over 184 million. The maximum indebtedness would be that 166.6. And again, that is a maximum amount that may have to go down. The capacity in 2020 dollars is 88,900,000. And then we broke out by 5-year increments the amount of money expected in 5-year periods within the area. Within Nick's spreadsheet, he estimates when different borrowings could occur and what those amounts of borrowings are. Those are only estimates for this particular finance plan, just to show what the capacity could be. Those will obviously change over time as real amounts of tax increment revenue come in and the agency decides what its priorities are and when they ought to issue bonds. But this just shows a potential for how that might look. So it shows 4 different major borrowings. And I know that doesn't add up to that total maximum indebtedness number. And that is because the principal amount doesn't include the interest. And there are also assumptions within the finance plan of pay-as-you-go borrowing. So not all borrowing would be done under a formal loan instrument like a bond or a loan. It could just be done from expenditures could be done from that tax increment revenue on an annual basis. And those expenditures do count against the maximum indebtedness. It just means you don't have to formally incur that debt if you don't need to. Are there any questions on tables 2 and 3?
I'm not
So-
seeing any hands raised. I'm just looking. It's a lot of information, so
It is. So then the next step in our review is to prepare a finance plan that goes over every year of the expected duration of the area and projects both those loan payments and what the debt service coverage ratio is. And so the next few tables just cover that debt portion. And then after that, the tables cover allocating those monies to projects. So this table goes from fiscal year end 2023 to 2032 and just shows those debt payments over time and then what the ending balance is. So money that isn't used for the debt gets transferred to the URA projects fund. So this shows the time frame from fiscal year end 2033 to 2043, and then from 2044 to 2052, anticipating that the area would end in 2052. When Nick and I prepare urban renewal plans, we try to make sure people understand when the projections end. We've seen a lot of urban renewal plans that say, you know, the debt ends at a certain year, but they don't say when that debt is paid off. Our urban renewal plans make sure to let people know when that debt is expected to be paid given the assumptions. So the assumptions on this are the 7% growth rate, and with that, that amount of debt could be paid off in fiscal year end 2052. Are there questions about those detailed debt?
Cassandra has her hand raised.
Hi, not a question, just a comment. I appreciate that you do that, Elaine. I think it's really helpful, and we have had plans in our service area that they just kind of wean out the payoff and then it extends the life pretty considerably. So we really value that more transparent approach.
Yes, thank you. When Nick and I started doing these 15 years ago, and we started noticing those plans that did that, we just thought, well, that's not really telling the whole story here. So we try to make sure we tell the whole story and what the assumptions are, so that in 10 or 15 years, when we aren't around, people look back at this, they know what those assumptions were based on and what the expectations were. So the next set of tables shows, given those resources.
Sorry, Chris, sorry.
I just figured this is my last chance. Is 7% normal? It seems, is that like what you guys have been seeing, the 7% growth rate? Because if it doesn't grow 7%, it'll take longer to generate the revenue.
Chris, that's correct. And 7% is aggressive. There is huge potential in that industrial area, obviously, but 7% is an aggressive growth scenario.
It looks like Cassandra has her hand raised, and then Tim.
Sorry, now I do have a question. Has there been any discussion at the city level about including language in the plan that says it will not exceed 30 years as far as paying off the debt and retiring the plan?
Not yet. I mean, if you're asking us to have that discussion, so far there has not been discussion about putting a duration provision into the plan.
I would say either way. It just hasn't come up.
Yep.
Sometimes that's helpful for the overlapping taxing districts, just to know that, 30 years is already a very long time, for that base to remain frozen. Knowing it won't be even longer than 30 years might offer some of the overlapping taxing districts some assurance.
Good feedback.
Seems very reasonable too.
Tim and then Phil.
So on the 7% rate, because there was a lot of conversation about that at the work session. Elaine, correct me if I'm wrong, that's one of the few parameters you cannot change going forward in a URA, but it doesn't mean you have to spend that much. Is that correct?
Once we establish the maximum indebtedness, the other factors used to that are basically irrelevant. So as any urban renewal area is implemented and you see what those real growth rates are, your finance plans can be updated. And that is specifically, I think, why Cassandra says, let's look at 30 years, because if you don't achieve that 7%, you won't get that $166 million of maximum indebtedness. And if it doesn't happen in those 30 years, then the question is, do we go ahead and end at 30 years, or do we keep extending until we reach that number?
Thank you. That makes sense. My take on it, as I thought about it earlier, was more that just having the ability to capture the higher growth rates early on, as opposed to trying to extend it, is really the thought.
Phil, go ahead.
Thank you. You referred to that 7% growth as aggressive. What would be a typical or a kind of I guess a medium or perhaps even a conservative growth rate that you would typically see?
In the feasibility studies and the initial information, we used a 6% growth rate for this.
Right.
That was higher than a lot of urban renewal plans, but we felt very comfortable with that because the city of Sherwood itself achieves a fairly high assessed value growth, and there is so much developable land within the area. So we don't think that 6% is aggressive for Sherwood. We think it's doable. We think the 7% is aggressive. It may also be doable, just given the fact that Sherwood sees a lot of growth. And if you're able to actually implement the growth within those areas, you could get to that amount. So I think for the taxing districts, the real question is the one that Cassandra asked, which is, it doesn't matter too much to you guys what growth rate they use. What matters more to you is knowing when the district will end.
Thank you.
Elaine, I don't see any other questions at this time.
Okay. So the next few pages just take that amount of tax increment revenue and allocates it to projects. The city council gave us direction in the workshop that we had last month that they were very interested in doing the pedestrian bridge, the broadband installation, and the festival plaza parking early on, and potentially jump-starting those projects by some kind of interagency agreement between the urban renewal area and the city. So we tried to move those projects up as early as we could to show funding here. Again, this funding is just one finance plan that shows that it's feasible, but if the city did decide to go ahead and do some kind of jump start to the area, these projects could potentially be moved forward, those three projects, and paid for in through that interagency agreement. So as a requirement of the statute, we have to present a plan that stands on its own and is financially feasible. And this plan does that, but we do know that the city council wants to move forward on those 3 projects as soon as possible. Councilor Rosner, do you want to add anything to that?
I think you portrayed what we talked about very well. The only thing I would add is, you know, when I think, Elaine, I think when you're talking about an interagency agreement between the city and the URA, you know, we're looking at creative financing too, because right now, as we all know, the cost of construction is climbing every year way faster than inflation. So the sooner we do some of these projects, the better. And we're kind of in a happy situation where loan rates or bond rates are really, really low. So when you start to look at construction cost increases and the cost to borrow money right now, it makes a lot of sense when you look at the net present value of an entire project to maybe take a loan out or do an internal bond or even take a loan out against one of our other funds to accelerate a project, then have the URA pay it back. We could potentially save a lot of money for the city and the community doing that. So that's part of the thinking as we've talked about it with our finance team and the council. If that helps.
Yes. So again, this goes through the different pages similar to the debt service plan. So the different years ending in fiscal year and 2052. So the Urban Renewal Agency has the ability to move these projects around in terms of priority and timing. This is just one finance plan that shows that it is financially feasible to include these projects with the plan and how those might be allocated. And does show the ability, given those assumptions, to complete this in fiscal year end 2052. Are there any questions on those set of tables?
I'm not seeing any hands raised, Elaine.
Okay. So the next, not sure why this will give me 1 page instead of 2, but the next set of tables show that projected impacts then to the taxing district's permanent rate levies. Again, your general obligation levies and local option levies are not impacted. And it shows it by year, by taxing jurisdiction. We separate out the general government and the education just because measures 47, 50, and 5 require those separations of taxing district impacts. And so that's why these are separated out. And again, these go for the full time period, understanding that for the education, for the education service district and the school district, the impacts are on the state school fund. And so we talk about that as an indirect impact to the school district and the ESD because they're funded on a per pupil basis. And Bill is on the phone and he can, I mean, on this meeting, so he can definitely chime in or ask any questions about that. So, yeah, I think I can get the total impacts on the screen, and I don't know how tiny that is for you all. Are there any questions on those tables?
I'm not seeing any raised hands.
The final final table that's important to the taxing jurisdictions that has to be included in the formal documents that the city council adopts is a table that just looks at what the projection would be for fiscal year in 2053, which would be the year after the area is expected to terminate. So it just looks at what the tax rates are, how much money they would be expecting from that base, how much money would come from the excess value. So the excess value is the amount of taxes off the growth in the area over that 30-year time period. And then what that total amount of taxes would be off of that full urban renewal area at its termination. So again, that's all based on that 7% growth scenario for the areas, but it does show waiting that 30 years and getting that new development within the area has a huge payoff for all taxing jurisdictions, in addition to creating new job opportunities and improving the city of Sherwood. Are there questions
Chris
on that?
has her hand raised.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm taking advantage of the time. So for the Washington County, we have a total for Washington County at the top, which is around 30, which is, I thought I saw 35 million. I thought I saw 35 million for Washington County in the measure, in the thing above. Okay, so then go down to the next. So then maybe I didn't listen well enough on this one. Additional revenues obtained after termination of tax increment financing. Okay, so because before you didn't break out Enhanced Sheriff's Patrol and Urban Road Maintenance District. So does that mean that the 35 million includes revenue loss for those different types of, did you take all of Washington County's property tax, including the Urban Road Maintenance District and the Enhanced Sheriff Patrol, and as part of the 35 million? And then what does table 8 really do? Does that mean that, I guess I don't understand what those two lines mean, because evidently the city of Sherwood will annex these areas. So if they're in earned or Enhanced Sheriff Patrol now, presumably they would come out anyway because Sherwood would annex those areas.
Yes, and that's a really good point, and we don't have that included in here because we don't know when those annexations will actually occur. So yes, if you go back to this table, Washington County itself is in column 1.
Okay.
And then Enhanced Sheriff Patrol is in column 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, I get it.
And then Urban Road Maintenance is over here. And those amounts are relatively tiny, and you're right, those amounts will probably disappear at some point when they get annexed. So when we come down here, you have the same thing. Those are included here, but again, these figures will probably change once those are annexed. So for Washington County itself, off of the value of the area at the time it's established, you'll keep getting $407,885 every year.
Okay, I got table 8 now.
This is off of that increased growth in the area that prior to the termination of the area goes to the agency. At the termination of the area, that would go to the county. And so you add those two numbers together.
Okay.
And the expectation then would be this area will produce about $3.7 million of taxes for the county in fiscal year end 2053.
Okay, more than, it just shows the benefit that will come to the county in 30 years.
Yes.
As a result of the increased assessed valuation. Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, I missed those two columns in the previous table.
That's all right. Nope, the previous table was really small, so having these meetings over the computer is helpful in many ways, but figuring out how to present all this information is difficult. Okay. So those are the financial tables that end up in the report. These are the tables we have in there now. And again, we are trying to figure out how to deal with that maximum indebtedness issue. So we know these tables won't get larger. The impacts won't get larger than this, but they could get smaller depending on how we resolve the maximum indebtedness issue.
Elaine,
Are
it
there
looks like
any-
Cassandra has her hand raised.
Okay.
Just reflecting on Christina's comment about table 8 and what you're illustrating is the additional revenue that would be garnered by the overlapping taxing districts once the plan is retired.
Yes.
That frozen base and the valuation within the urban renewal plan area, do you ever do a separate analysis that contemplates what the 3% per year would be and then calculate that differential between, just kind of
Sure.
for reality?
Yeah.
And I'm not taking issue with this, just curiosity.
We sometimes have done that. It gets really confusing. Cassandra, you know more about urban renewal than most people, so you totally know what that would mean. And it would be pretty easy for us to prepare that and give that to you. For putting it in the actual documents, it gets so confusing to the average person that we have included that in the past, and we have gotten feedback that it gets too confusing. But for the actual taxing districts involved, I think that's a really good question, and it wouldn't be hard for us to provide you that information. So we can look into doing that for you if you'd like.
I don't want to create a bunch of work for you. It was more of a point of curiosity because there would be a little bit of a down adjustment. I mean, just to be completely transparent and accurate about that, the delta between the plan with and without, the frozen base. So that's it. I don't want to create work for you though.
Okay, if there are no more questions on the financial part, I'll go back to the PowerPoint. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, rid of that.
So Elaine, while you're going back to the PowerPoint, is there in the PowerPoint, I don't remember, a list of the different projects and what the total cost is versus the URA contribution?
I didn't put, I can pull that up from the report. I didn't put it in simply because I know that's going to change a little bit given what our final MI is. I can find that page in the report if you want me to pull that up.
Well, I guess if committee members wanted to see that, knowing that it's subject to change, I'd like to be able to provide that to them. If there's not interest, then you don't need to do that, but.
Councilor Rosner has his hand raised.
Yeah, Tim, I think it would be helpful that, especially to the taxing districts, to give them that information because it does show that the contributions that are coming from other sources toward these projects. And Cassandra, I think you mentioned that would be good information for your board to understand, just knowing that we're still tuned in.
Yeah, it's subject to change, but at least it is what it is right now, so.
Okay. I am going to pull that up. So this is what is in the report, and we can actually, it doesn't have that total cost anymore, but we can add that in if people think that is helpful, especially looking at that public works facility cost. But this is what the total cost of each project is in constant fiscal year in 2020 dollars. And then in that finance plan that we looked at, that was the 3 pages long, the year of expenditure project cost with a 3% inflation rate for that cost. And as Councilor Rosner said, we're using 3%, but the cost of projects, we don't know for sure what that inflation rate will be. And then we also put in a column that is from the finance plan, what the expected date is for completion or expenditure on those projects. What I had anticipated doing once we finished knowing for sure what our maximum indebtedness was sending out to the committee this table with that other column in it that has what the total cost of the project was. And then if input from other people is that we should have that in the formal report also, we can certainly add that into the formal report.
I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. And because I think you could also have confusion where people look at this and go, well, there's no way you can do that project for that amount of money. And, or, you know, there's the other side of the coin. So having that complete information.
Okay. We can do that. So I am going to go back to the PowerPoint.
Tim, your hand is up again. Thank you.
No, it's not.
Elaine, are you there?
Something must have happened.
I know she just disappeared. Oh, there she is. There. Okay. Hi,
Sorry
Elaine,
about
welcome back.
Yeah, sorry. You never know. I don't know why it is not letting me bring up the PowerPoint. But I can tell you exactly what's in it, and I don't think we have to have the PowerPoint to go through the next parts. So I'm just gonna do that on my own.
We'll send everybody out the PowerPoint as well so that they can have a copy of what you presented. So
Yes, and I don't know why it won't. Let's try that one.
you had it up for a second and then you
Oh, I
walked out of the
did,
room.
yeah.
It's coming. It's coming. It's almost there. There you go.
So there we go.
There we go.
Mm.
So funny when this all first happened that, you know, it's like if you were to be in a real life meeting and have the conversations and the things happen in that meeting that you have happen in Zoom
I
or
know.
Teams, it would be hilarious. It's like,
Yeah, it's
Elaine
like
just walked out of the room suddenly.
I know. So there
If you
are
haven't already, you should watch the video with the attorney that is at a hearing with the judge who has the
Oh.
cat face.
Oh,
Yeah,
my
we
God.
saw that.
I don't
It's so funny.
Ever laugh so hard. It
I
gave
laugh
us
every
all
time
some
I watch
levity.
that. I can't just.
That was the best. That was awesome.
It was. At least that hasn't happened to me. So,
What we go to for humor now.
I know. So
You can relate to it a little
the
too much.
city is reviewing the draft plan and report formal documents. And will be giving me back their edits and we'll put those in final form. The agency, and we're trying to resolve this maximum indebtedness issue. The agency is expected to review the draft plan and report on March 2nd. And the day after that is usually when we send out the letters to the impacted taxing districts. And those letters will contain the attachments of the draft plan and report, and they will contain a draft resolution that the city will look at for concurrence that can be, if you want to review concurrence can be put into your own formats. We don't presume to tell you what to do, but give you the language that the city will be reviewing. We will make sure that those letters explain that public works building project and the resulting ability to develop that property within the central business district, which for the city is a much higher and better use of that property and would put it back on the property tax rolls. So the letter will contain both the consult and confer information and the draft resolution for concurrence. For the county, it will also contain the information for their need to actually adopt the plan because there are unincorporated properties. And this map shows where those unincorporated properties are. And because there are unincorporated properties, the county must also formally approve the entire plan. And they do that through a resolution. And we will prepare a draft resolution for your legal counsel to review. We've done that on a couple of other urban renewal plans that intersect Washington County. So your legal counsel is familiar with working with us on that issue. So we will prepare that packet for you to review and edit as you see fit. So these are the potential next steps, which would be the agency review on March 2nd, mail out the taxing district letters March 3rd. We have a briefing to Washington County on the 16th. They are scheduled to consider the vote on the public building on April 6th. It goes to the Planning Commission on April 27th, and then the county is to consider the vote on the plan and unincorporated properties on May 4th. TV, FNR, a presentation and consider vote, and we need to work with Cassandra to figure out when you want those presentations. And the same with the school district. We need those presentations sometime before, and your input before May 18th, if at all possible. And then the city council hearing is potentially scheduled for May 18th with a vote on the ordinance June 1st. And I can now see. Yeah, so
I was going to say, it looks like Cassandra has a comment or a question.
I was going to recommend, although I see that it conflicts with the Sherwood Planning Commission, but our scheduled board meeting in April is April 27th.
Okay.
And because our board meetings occur the fourth Tuesday of each month, that provides a buffer should we choose April 27th in case there's some hiccup or anything else to go back in front of our board in May.
What time are your meetings at, Cassandra?
Well, this one may be 6 o'clock. We have been doing them earlier in light of COVID. So it's either 3 p.m. or 6 p.m. How's that for accuracy? I will follow up with you to be certain. And then the other less desirable date, because it doesn't provide any wiggle room at all, would be May 25th.
So I think either 3 or 6 would work. Our planning commission meeting doesn't start until 7, so I think that would be fine.
Okay, great. I will put a tentative placeholder on our board agenda for April 27th, if that works for the group.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Hey, Phil, do you have any sense about the school board?
This is Phil. Our April meeting is scheduled for April 14th, and they typically start at 7.
Do you see, how would we get on their agenda, Phil? Is that through?
Yeah, I made a note to when I'm with my next check-in with Jim Rose to put that, bring that forward.
And if the 14th doesn't work, what's the next available one?
I think we have one meeting. It would be it would be May 12th.
Okay, so that April 14th would be preferable. if possible.
Yeah, I think yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So that is the information we wanted to share today. We know we need to get back to you when we resolve the maximum indebtedness issue and get back to you on showing you the actual projects in the plan, the full cost of those projects, and the allocations from urban renewal. So we will do that prior to your getting the letter, just to keep you informed and updated so that you know where we are. Is there anything else that you would like us to let you know once we settle on that maximum indebtedness issue? If we rework if it goes lower and we rework all of the tables, would you like to have them retransmitted to you prior to seeing them in the formal plan and report?
Yes, that'd be nice just to have them available.
Okay.
Elaine, Phil has his hand up.
Yeah.
Thank you. I apologize. I should have asked this question earlier in financial planning, but the estimated interest rates for the 4 series of bonds that were issued, how were the interest rates determined?
That is a good question. I think we went with fairly low interest rates at the beginning of the plan, and I'm pulling it up right now to look at. And I can look at and then
Yeah,
as
you're.
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, as you were pulling that up, we did go with lower rates in the beginning because we know they're low. And then they took sort of more average rates in the later years.
Yes. So in the financial packet that we sent to you, in the memo, I'm bringing that up. There's a table 3.
The table 3.
Right.
Table 3. Yeah.
Right. And it shows that we started out with a interest rate of 3%, 3.5, and then went up to 5.
Right. I was just curious because in our own planning, we'll typically start with maybe current rates and then add something to that for allowing for when we might actually issue. And I was just curious if you had done something similar to that and what that we refer to it as a cushion might.
Yeah. Typically in our plans, we've used 5%, but we know that right now interest rates are much lower. And so that's why we reduce those 2 initial borrowings to the 3 and 3.5.
Thank you.
Is there anything else? Just from me, and I'm sure the city will chime in too, we appreciate all of your input and the time it's taken out of your already busy schedules to work with us on this, and look forward to getting you the final documents and working with you on the final issues as we move forward.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
I'll
echo
definitely.
those comments.
As do I. Sorry, we were both agreeing and echoing at the same time. Yeah, very much appreciate that. And if in the course of your communication with the groups that you are representing, you identify any additional questions or comments that you think we should be aware of, please share that with us as we move forward. That would be greatly appreciated. We're happy to answer any questions that you come up with in the course of us continuing to move forward.
Thanks for all your work.
I want to say my appreciation for how well organized you have been, and everything you sent out to us made it very easy to follow. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. All right, we'll be back to
Thank you
you,
all.
and thanks again, and hopefully you all have power and are safe. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm lucky I'm out in Bend, and missed the ice storm, but both of my sons are out of power. So, it's a mess.
Are you?
Spring's
Is that-
on its way.
Yeah.
We
Wow.
were joking with Bruce, who is new to Portland, about how Portlanders totally get discombobulated with any amount of snow. But we didn't tell him what happens when there's an ice storm.
Yeah, exactly. It was only an inch on each car.
Yeah. Yeah. And
A
trees.
lot of boiling water.
Trees down all over the place. Yeah. East wind and ice. Yeah, that does it.
Yeah.
It was just a mild storm, Bruce.
All right, Texas is much worse.
Be happy you're not in
Bruce is
Texas.
Bruce's former state's doing worse than we are down in Texas.
Yeah.
Much worse than Dallas.
But
Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.